towards Moscow. Putin says that this is a blow to Russia and against our people. He also termed it as a treason that was being carried out by trusted people. He said anyone who takes arms against the army should be considered as traitors. President Putin says Russia's future is at stake. The game is rising in Russia. The war has resulted in an unexpected twist, with Russia's private mercenaries, the Wagner Group, moving away from its location in Ukraine and passing through the borders in Russia and marching straight towards Moscow. Putin has an appeal saying we require unity. President Putin says Russia's future is at stake. Putin warns Wagner rebels of stern action will be taken if they continue with their march. Putin says this is a blow to Russia and against our people. Vladimir Putin facing an outright rebellion from the Wagner Group, a private army of mercenaries led by 62-year-old Yevgeny Prigozhin, and this is something that is already changing the game in the Ukraine war. The Wagner Group was brought in to take over one of the operations that were carried by the Russian army, especially when it comes to the city of Bakhmut. And it is being said that in a bloody fight, they were able to retake and sustain the city. But now it is being said that 62-year-old Yevgeny has decided to take the march of his 25,000 strong Wagner private mercenaries to Russia, and they've crossed the border and entered Russia. Many of them claim that there is no resistance that has been offered in Russia towards them and that they are moving towards Moscow. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin in a televised address has said that a treason has been taking place against the Russian state, and Putin has warned the Wagner rebels of stern action against them. It is being said that they've been charged with treason, which carries a 20-year term. They've also asked them to get in touch with the authorities as soon as possible, and many of them have also asked them to abandon Prigozhin as he marches what Prigozhin claims is an attempt to teach a lesson to the army top brass of the Russian military for the actions being taken on the ground and not being true when it comes to the situation in Ukraine. These are visuals, these are social media posts that speak about Wagner convoy vehicles surrounding a Ministry of Defense building in a specified city in south of Ukraine. These visuals, in fact, uploaded by some of the users in that city to say that there is a movement when it came to the Wagner Group moving into the Russian city. Vladimir Putin finding a very difficult situation right now, where he is having an impasse on the Ukraine front and at the same time is facing an outright rebellion from the mercenaries group that he had sent in to Ukraine. Russian president saying that it is the future of Russia could be at stake and has asked the people to unite against the Wagner Group, which is now with a 25,000 strong, armed and well-trained batch of mercenaries moving towards Moscow. Vladimir Putin, meanwhile, making that televised address, asking for unity on the part of the Russians to fight against the Wagner Group. Things have coming to a head, especially after there has been a showdown between the Wagner Group head as well as the Russian top military. It is being said that the Wagner Group head had been asking for proper support, especially in trying to maintain the ground in Bakhmut, but there has been several attempts on the part of the Russian military also to move into Ukraine and break the impasse, and some of the crucial elements of support that was promised was not given, and this had resulted in heavy casualties for the Wagner Group as well as for the Russian forces. And now we have the 62-year-old head of the group now marching with 25,000 strong mercenary into the heart of Russia. They are claiming that they are not facing any sort of resistance. Meanwhile, they have surrounded a building, is what we understand from the last media posts that have been coming in, reports coming in. However, a social media post has pointed out that there are groups of convoys belonging to the Wagner Group moving around a particular building which is supposed to be with the defense department, and it is being surrounded by them. So clearly it looks like another standoff, another twist in the Ukraine war that we are seeing right now. Many of them, in fact, speculating that the situation with Putin is going to get very tough, especially if he's going to face a rebellion in the middle of this crucial war in Ukraine. Russia's Security Service FSB has also opened up cases against Prigozhin, and it is being said that these cases relate to treason. The Russian top military brass has also asked some of the mercenary troops to abandon the 62-year-old head of the Wagner Group. Many of them say that Wagner Group has been trying to get into the military brass, asking questions regarding as to what would be the future outcome of the Ukrainian war, and most of them did not have an answer to it, and this had led to a showdown between the Wagner Group and the Russian military top brass.
The leadership of the Defense Ministry rigorously deceives the President, and the President receives those reports that do not correspond to reality in any way. There are two agendas. One is on the ground and the other is on the President's desk. And we listen all day long about 60 destroyed Leopards, about 3,000 destroyed enemy soldiers. I asked the commanders on the ground why we do not give the number of our soldiers who were killed and wounded. I was told that nobody at the top is interested in it. There is a task that must be accomplished, and we will calculate how many will die later after the war. No one was interested by what efforts victory would be achieved, and at the time when we arrived, it was already impossible to talk about victory. Relatives of various soldiers unrelated to the Wagner private military company write me every day and ask questions. Guys who went to the Russian Defense Ministry. The number of missing persons that we can see is just impossible. They were thrown away like meat because there was no possibility to take on the territory. It is hidden until now. The Defense Ministry tries to deceive the public, the President, and tell a story that there was a crazy aggression from the Ukrainian side and that they were going with the NATO alliance to attack us. Therefore, the so-called special operation of the 24th of February was started for the reasons. The war was necessary for a bunch of bastards to triumph and promote themselves, showing what a strong army it was. The oligarchs needed the war. It was needed by the clan that actually controls Russia today. This clan gets everything it can. If foreign businesses are close to this clan, then the state immediately divides domestic businesses and gives it to them. Everything that happened, our holy war with those who offend the Russian people, those who are trying to humiliate them, has turned into racketeering, or rather into financial impropriety, raised to the rank of law, to the rank of national ideology.
Well, this is the latest visuals that is coming in. it's not coming in from any news agency, but there are a lot of social media posts that have been putting up about the Wagner Group, especially making themselves entrenched in the city of Rostov. And it is being said that Putin himself has said that the situation in southern Russia, especially around Rostov, is going to be quite difficult, hinting at the possibility that the Wagner Group mercenaries have in fact pitched themselves in Rostov and also would have taken upon the administration of the southern part of Russia. And this huge rebellion that is being faced by Vladimir Putin has forced him to come on a televised address saying that he will do take action against this treachery, but at the same time said that Russia will not be led into a civil war right now. Huge challenges before Russian President Putin. Putin says that he will face this rebellion and does not want to face a civil war within Russia. At the same time, there's a huge impasse on the Ukrainian front as well. Twin challenges to the Russian president, especially in the middle of the Ukrainian war, where Russia has been in an impasse and it has not been able to make any sort of gains, especially in eastern Ukraine. And right now what we see is a full-blown rebellion on the part of the Wagner Group, a mercenary group that has been used effectively by Russia overseas, and now this same group that has been used in Ukraine openly rebels against the Russian state. Putin says that the unity is the need of the hour to save the Russian state, and that the Russian state's future is at stake is what he has insisted in his televised address. He's also said that he vows to punish the traitors from the Wagner rebellion, and he also has said that the Wagner mutiny has turned out to be a deadly threat to Russia, situation becoming a point of crisis, and rather another crisis that is emerging in Russia. Possibility of southern Russia facing a civil war kind of a situation with the mercenary group Wagner, and now the Putin coming out in the open saying that they will take a stand against the Wagner Group.
Обращаюсь к гражданам России.
I appeal to those pushed into the provocation of a military rebellion. We require unity, consolidation, and responsibility. Those who carry deliberately on the path of treason, preparing an armed rebellion when you were preparing terrorist attacks, will be punished. Any internal turmoil is a deadly threat to our statehood for us as a nation. It is a blow to Russia for our people and our actions to protect our homeland. Such a threat will face a severe response. Russia's future is at stake. Describing the actions of mutineers as a stab in the back. Without specifically mentioning Wagner Group, the high ambitions of some have led to high treason. Russians have been tricked into a criminal adventure without specifically mentioning rebellious Wagner fighters.
All right, this is huge breaking news coming in from Russia. President Putin facing a massive crisis, perhaps the biggest domestic crisis, at least since the invasion of Ukraine more than a year ago, with the Wagner mercenary group having turned on Russia, having turned on the Putin administration. 25,000 troops of this mercenary group have been in fact marching towards the Defense Ministry headquarters. They have already taken control of a major Russian city, Rostov, and the head of the group has in fact threatened a coup. He says that he and his troops will do everything in their power to topple the administration if they have to, because he in fact blames the Putin administration for some of the attacks that have taken place on his sense, charging towards the Russian capital, Moscow. Vladimir Putin has addressed the nation. A sharp reaction, predictably, to this major development and attempted coup, with President Putin saying that what these men are doing amounts to treason and betrayal. This is a knife in the back of Russia and its people, and he has gone as far as to say the very future of Russia is at stake here. My colleague Verghese is with me in the studio as he continues to closely track the developments in Russia. Verghese, to even say that this is an earth-shattering development would be an understatement. You have a Russia that's already engaged in a war with Ukraine for over a year now, and now suddenly Putin finds himself in a situation where this Russian mercenary group called Wagner has decided to turn on him and his administration. They are clearly threatening him with a coup right now. They've taken control of one major city right now, and Putin has actually, for once, frankly admitted that with this coup attempt, the future of Russia itself is at stake. I mean, one cannot even begin to imagine what the consequences of a coup, if it were to be successful, could actually be for Russia.
Well, it all, as you pointed out, there are so many factors and a lot of ifs and buts that are there. And I think a lot of political international pundits will be trying to figure out what would be Putin's response right now when it comes to this situation. On one side, you have a possibility of a civil war, and that too from the staging area against Ukraine, that is to say southern Russia. And the other possibility is that you have an impasse, and you had already moved tactical nuclear weapons towards Belarus. Belarus had already taken a receipt of those tactical nuclear weapons. It has been an ally to Putin when it came to the invasion of Ukraine. So much is happening on the ground, and probably we are sitting on a tinderbox. We don't know how far Putin can be pushed when it comes to this. When he says the future of Russia is at stake, what is he trying to say? He's been playing the nationalist card from the time he's been in power. He's been saying that he represents Russia's authority when it comes to its history as well. So he's been trying to bring what many call as the white Russia, make it more prominent and bring it back on the world stage. And when NATO tried to bring in Ukraine into its fold, it had resulted in this war that we see today. But now, is what he's saying, is he true? Is it losing control over Russia? Is Putin, who has been its prime minister to president, he has always had this interesting political game with him as well as his allies, playing, at least being a president or the prime minister. So he's always been in a position of executive power until they change the constitution to give him another 6-year term. So this is how we have seen Putin being in power. But this person who's been in power for long seems to be losing control, because as you rightly pointed out, he's admitted for the first time that the situation is going to be difficult in South Russia. Now, with an army that has already lost its morale in its battle in Ukraine, conscripts being pushed into the war zone, how much of fighting ability does the Russian soldiers have to protect Putin's regime? That is the big question that we should be asking right now, because the claim by Yevgeny Prigozhin is that there was no resistance offered to them, and he's also given an open call for conscripts as well as those who are against this war to join him. Interestingly enough, Sneha, this is a repeat of a Russian incident itself that happened, what we call as the Streltsy uprising way back in 1698. Similarly, the Streltsys, which were considered to be an elite unit of the Russian army then in 1698, was all against the Tsar Peter the First, who had used them in campaigns in Azov. And in a similar kind of way, they felt betrayed and they started marching towards Russia. But Peter the First was able to crush that rebellion, and a lot of Streltsy unit leaders were tortured and killed, and then this unit was disbanded then. So the same kind of the 1698 politics is now playing in 2023. You have a very unpopular war. The people who have brought in you victory somewhere close to it are feeling betrayed, and now they're marching straight into Moscow to replace you. So it is a replay of history from 1698 that we are looking at.
Well, history does have mysterious ways of repeating itself, Verghese. I think that is a very interesting parallel that you've drawn, and a relevant one with this situation that is currently unfolding right before our eyes. This is something that has really sent shockwaves through the world. Let's quickly, for the benefit of our viewers, recap essentially what is going on in Russia as we speak. Yevgeny Prigozhin, the founder of the Russian private military group, or mercenary, as they're called, Wagner, has accused Russia's military leadership of killing, as he put it, a huge amount of his mercenary forces in a strike on a camp. He has vowed to retaliate. He says dozens, tens of thousands of lives of Russian soldiers will be punished. I ask that nobody put up any resistance. In fact, according to the reports that are currently emerging, it would seem as if Wagner forces have indeed managed to take control of a major Russian city, Rostov, without encountering any kind of resistance from the Russian armed forces. So is that really the real story that's playing out here, among other things? Prigozhin has urged Russians, as Verghese just pointed out, to join his forces and punish Moscow's military leadership and this is clearly the most audacious challenge that President Putin has faced since the beginning of his military offensive in Ukraine on the 24th of February 2022. What has Vladimir Putin said? He delivered an address to the nation a short while ago. He said those who are on the path of treason or are preparing armed rebellion will be severely punished. He has appealed to the Wagner forces, saying, I appeal to those who've been pushed into the provocation of a military rebellion, that we require unity, consolidation and responsibility. He's also issued a threat. He says those who carry deliberately on a path of treason and are preparing an armed rebellion, when you were preparing terrorist attacks, this will not go unpunished. He says any internal turmoil is a deadly threat to our statehood. For us as a nation, it's a blow to Russia, to its people, and our actions to protect our homeland. Such a threat will face a severe response. Let's listen in once again to what President Putin said in that address to the nation just a short while ago.
Обращаюсь к гражданам России.
I appeal to those pushed into the provocation of a military rebellion. We require unity, consolidation and responsibility. Those who carry deliberately on the path of treason, preparing an armed rebellion when you were preparing terrorist attacks, will be punished. Any internal turmoil is a deadly threat to our statehood for us as a nation. It is a blow to Russia, for our people and our actions to protect our homeland. Such a threat will face a severe response. Russia's future is at stake, describing the actions of mutineers as a stab in the back. Without specifically mentioning Wagner Group, the high ambitions of some have led to high treason. Russians have been tricked into a criminal adventure without specifically mentioning rebellious Wagner fighters.
Right. That was Russian President Vladimir Putin delivering an address to the nation a short while ago, firstly appealing to members of the Wagner forces to retreat, to turn their backs on their chief, to abandon this mission, which is clearly an attempted coup. On the other hand, he's also issued a threat saying anybody who's on the path of treason will be severely punished. He has called this action by the Wagner Group chief an act of treason, betrayal, and being tantamount to putting a knife in the back of the Russian people. He then went on to say that with this, the very future of Russia is at stake. Let me go back to my colleague Verghese at this point to discuss in further detail what the possible ramifications of these developments could be. Because, Verghese, you know, I think it would not be incorrect to say that, you know, this was perhaps beyond anybody's imagination. And look at the irony of the situation. We are talking about a man, Yevgeny Prigozhin, and his mercenary group, the Wagner Group, which had been engaged by Russia, by the Putin administration, to actually wage a war on Ukraine on behalf of Russia, on behalf of Russia's military leadership. For over a year now, the Wagner forces have, in a sense, fought the Ukraine war shoulder to shoulder with the Russian military. For the longest time, there was talk about how Bakhmut, one of the strategically most important cities of Ukraine, was likely to fall thanks to the Wagner Group and its massive offensive on Ukraine. But look how the tables have turned on Putin. The very forces, the very mercenaries that he was using to launch an offensive and to carry on with his offensive on Ukraine have today turned on him, threatening his own survival and, as he put it, the very future of the country that he presides over.
It's a very evolving strategic situation and probably a huge power vacuum that might emerge if the people who are engaged in this coup are able to remove Putin from power. But I'm not looking at that aspect of whether there will be a power vacuum, because Putin is not going to let this go down without a fight. And Putin has sway over several such forms of paramilitary forces, and one of those forces are from Chechnya, which is in fact what we call as the Kadyrovites, who have, along with Russian forces, have been taking part in the invasion of Ukraine. And there are several such groups that Putin has been able to hold on to, and they had pledged loyalty to Putin. But this is for the first time that we see that Putin's hold on something as significant as the Wagner Group weakening, and you have his very head coming out against him. One, Neha, this war is very unpopular with a lot of Russians. There are two things for this. The Russians and the Ukrainians technically have the same cultural as well as linguistic origins. That is to say that they all come from Kiev, which is the area which Russians as well as the Ukrainians trace their civilizational history to. They have come from the same church, which is to say that when Prince Vladimir first baptized themselves in the 1100s, both of them associate their Christianity or their religious spirituality with that location. And recently, both of them were united under the Moscow Patriarchate of Russia. And now this division that has come in has already resulted in asking that question. So it is probably a brother kind of a battle that we are looking. And it was kind of highly unpopular with a lot of Russians because they didn't want to go and fire at their brethren Orthodox Christians. So this has been going on for quite some time between a lot of Russians as to why this war is still being dragged on. So there is no will to fight against their own brethren. Now, the other issue is that Putin has been strategically looking at this from the time this war has taken place. Putin has taken over Crimea first. Then after taking over Crimea, which has historically seen a lot of Russian blood being spent on it to ensure that it remains a part of Russia. And then Ukraine has been the breadbasket of the Soviet Union and of the Russian Empire for a very long time. And Ukraine has been historically part of the Russian history as well. So Ukraine, to a large extent, especially after its independence and emergence, it's been trying to move more into the Western camp, especially with the European Union and into the NATO camp. And for Russia, the big question has been the Soviet Union doesn't exist. Then why is why is NATO as a military group still pursuing its ends when it comes to Moscow? Still they have that attitude of trying to encircle Moscow. So Putin said that it cannot handle a NATO state right at its doorstep because it goes completely against its territorial integrity as well as its territorial security. So a lot of territorial reasons as well as strategic reasons were given by Putin when it came to Ukraine moving towards the Western camp. And now the war, which has been in an impasse for quite some time, we saw how the West has been supporting Ukraine and Ukrainian forces with the latest weapons, and it has stalled the Russians, which has affected Putin's hold on power. Because of this war continuing, it has been ravaging its economy, though it's been able to somehow balance it with the payment of oils, and of course India has been one of those recipients of Russian oil. So it has been able to sustain it with ensuring that the oil reserves of the country have been used to sustain it. Now it looks like the economy is not heading anywhere, the war is not heading anywhere, and the Russians have been paying for it, and therefore it looks like a group of Russians have decided that they will challenge his authority, because democratically also there have been many people who've been trying to challenge Putin's authority in Russia, but it has never been possible because of the overriding popularity Putin had at that time and still enjoys with a lot of Russians, because they think that Putin is the one who is putting Russia back on the world map. But this war has affected a lot of Putin's chances in trying to have that iron grip that he had earlier, and now it looks like all of them will have to look at the possibility of a weakened Putin. And if Putin is weak, then how much of a power struggle is going to take place within the walls of the Kremlin, within the Russian army, and also probably by other federal republics, because Russia even now is a federation of republics. So there could be more independence movement that might come out if Putin is seen weakened, Neha.
Absolutely. And, you know, there is so much understandably chatter about this huge development, even on the social media, Verghese, and all sorts of theories doing the rounds right now. Nobody really knows what exactly is going on there. As you know, it's very hard for information to even filter out of Russia. So a lot of chatter about what could be going on and what's behind it. I'm reading a tweet that says that it's clear that soldiers are simply laying down their weapons, and these are soldiers that actually belong to the official Russian army. Somebody says either the Russian army is completely paralyzed or it is a huge staged concert. That is why there are so many questions right now, very, very few answers available. We'll continue to bring you up to speed on these massive and dramatic developments that are unfolding in Russia. But for a moment, let's once again listen in to what the chief of the Wagner mercenary group said a short while ago. Listen in.
It's not a military coup. It's a march of justice. We are going to find out why the country has been plunged into lawlessness. Anyone who wants to join in. The defense minister ordered to hide 2,000 bodies which are stored there so as not to show the losses. The Ministry of Defense specifically conducted an operation to destroy the Wagner PMC. He used artillerymen and helicopter pilots in an unwitting fashion to destroy us. The chief of the general staff has just given the command to raise the aircraft and open fire on the convoys that are driving among civilian cars and trucks. He doesn't care who he kills. As of now, we have crossed state borders in all places. We are not fighting with children. We are not killing children.
All right, so that was Yevgeny Prigozhin, the chief of the Wagner mercenary group that has launched, some are calling it an armed rebellion, others calling it an insurrection, others calling it an attempted coup. But Verghese, whatever name you use to describe the situation that is unfolding in Russia, it is mind-boggling, it is baffling, and frankly, it is worrying, this is a worry not just for Russia, it would be a worry perhaps for the international community as well, because given some of the statements that Vladimir Putin has made in the past, the threats that he's issued, remember, almost since the beginning of the Ukraine war, he has been dangling the nuclear threat. Every time you've seen the United States or other Western nations, NATO members, coming out in support of Ukraine and President Zelensky, you've had Putin, in a sense, retaliating by issuing the nuclear threat, by, dangling the nuclear blackmail, because he has said from the very beginning all options are on the table. That was in the context of the Ukraine war. Now imagine here, this man who is known as an autocratic leader is saying that the future of Russia itself is at stake. There would be huge concerns about what Putin could do to cling to power in the face of a coup or an insurrection that he seems to be currently facing.
Well, there is a chance, as you rightly pointed out, he might go for that level of danger, because there has been a report, mostly prepared by Western intelligence agencies, about whether Putin has an ability to understand the level of danger. And it is being shockingly said that even from internal Soviet agencies that they were able to have a profile on him. Some of the Soviet intelligence agencies who had trained him also said that he had a very low sense of danger. So how much will he be able to push when it comes to this issue about nuclear weapons being used? A lot of experts are still in the guessing game, and they think that it could be a dangerous situation that they are facing. Meanwhile, also the fact that why he has said that the future of Russia is at stake. Russians have been fed with, from the time of the Russian Empire itself, have been fed with this theory that Russia is holding a huge amount of land on planet Earth, because they are one of the, it's not one of the, they are the largest country in the world, but population-wise, they are not spread evenly across the Eurasian region, which that country is having its territories in. So now what has happened is that Putin is appealing to that fear senses, saying that there's a possibility that your country could be broken up by powers that are beyond its borders. And he is pushing that fear theory, saying that these people are out to divide you up, and this country would be lost completely if they do that. Because there, as I said, there are several other republics within the Russian Federation who have been asking for autonomy as well as independence, and probably these fractures also could be played out. So it is, they are in fact playing on that fear of the Russians on with regard to this huge expanse of a land that this country covers. And probably Putin is also looking at that, because Putin, from the time he's taken over from Yeltsin, we have seen how the transition from the Soviet Union to the present Russia has been very chaotic under Yeltsin. Corruption has been an issue. Instability, they lost the Chechen war, the Russian army had a huge defeat in Chechnya, and when Putin took over, Putin started building its economy, it started to project its power, and it also tried to in fact ensure that some of the rebelling republics fall in line. So he has brought stability to what Yeltsin had left, but now with this Ukraine war, it looks like the manner in which he brought that stability was, of course, in an autocratic manner, and people who never agreed with him are now rising against him. But then the big question also is there, that is there a Western support for this coup that is happening?
That is $1 million question, isn't it? Because every time the West has come out in support of Ukraine, Putin has said that essentially they're launching a war on Russia. And now you have a situation where a mercenary group that has all this while been used by Russia to fight alongside their military in Ukraine, now the same forces have turned on Putin, on his administration. Is Putin going to accuse the West of being behind this? Is he going to accuse the US of being the puppet master and of the Wagner Group and its chief, Prigozhin of being just a puppet? Well, the man that we're talking about, a powerful warlord of sorts, a very strange sort of character, perhaps is an unpredictable man himself, a lot like the Russian president. But here, what you're looking at is really almost a war breaking out between two strong, intimidating and autocratic men who it seems would go to any length to capture or retain power. Let's once again listen in to what President Putin said in his address to the nation a short while ago, and then we will come back with more.
Обращаюсь к гражданам России.
I appeal to those pushed into the provocation of a military rebellion. We require unity, consolidation, and responsibility. Those who carry deliberately on the path of treason, preparing an armed rebellion when you were preparing terrorist attacks, will be punished. Any internal turmoil is a deadly threat to our statehood for us as a nation. It is a blow to Russia for our people and our actions to protect our homeland. Such a threat will face a severe response. Russia's future is at stake. Describing the actions of mutineers as a stab in the back. Without specifically mentioning Wagner Group, the high ambitions of some have led to high treason. Russians have been tricked into a criminal adventure without specifically mentioning rebellious Wagner fighters.
All right. So we have been playing out for you the statements that have been issued by Yevgeny Prigozhin, the chief of the Wagner mercenary group, as well as by Russian President Vladimir Putin, who has vowed retaliation, revenge, and said that there will be very serious consequences for anybody who is behind these actions. He says this is nothing but high treason, it is betrayal, and these actions amount to putting a knife in the back of our people. That is what the Russian president has said soon after the Wagner Group insurrection, in a sense, plunged the country and the region into a massive crisis. The Wagner military group, what have they done so far? Well, according to their claims, they have taken control of key military facilities in two Russian cities, Rostov and Voronezh. The Wagner chief, Prigozhin, has pledged to blockade Rostov and move on to Moscow if Russia's defense minister and top general refuse to meet him in the city where Russia's southern military district is headquartered. So it seems like it is the Wagner boss who holds all the aces, and he wants to call the shots. He is laying down the conditions, and he expects the Russian administration to play the game by his rules. Security, of course, has been stepped up around Moscow. The mayor has said that anti-terror measures are being carried out. This is happening in the city of Rostov too, but like we said, Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner Group, claims that his forces have taken control of that city. Putin is calling this internal treachery, betrayal, and he goes on to say that excessive ambition and vested interests have led to this treason. This is betrayal of one's country, one's people, and the cause for which the soldiers and commanders of the Wagner Group had earlier fought and died side by side with our other units. And Verghese, like I said, this really is, the irony of the entire situation, which is not lost on Putin, because in that address to the nation, he did point out the fact that the same Wagner Group and its forces had been fighting with the Russian army, over the last 1 year in Ukraine. They have been instrumental, in fact, in, Russia being able to capture some parts of Ukraine. including the strategically important city of Bakhmut. And now Russia, in fact, is saying that it is Kiev which is taking advantage of Prigozhin's provocation to make inroads around Bakhmut. You know, while there is no doubt, Verghese, that Ukraine will be watching this very closely with a lot of interest. If I'm not mistaken, Zelensky has issued a statement saying this is just the beginning. He is, in a sense, insinuating that he believes that, you know, Russia is almost imploding, or that this is the beginning of the end for Putin, the man who's waged a war on Ukraine over the last 1 year. The question really is, what happens next? Who really is in control? Who is calling the shots? Because going by the statements that Prigozhin has made, it looks as if he wants the top military leadership of Russia to meet the conditions that he is laying down. He says, you will have to come and talk to me. You will have to listen to what I have to say. I have already taken control of this one city, and my forces are now charging towards Moscow.
It is a very difficult situation that Putin has placed himself, and I have something very interesting about his rivalry with Prigozhin, because when we look about why this has happened, as you rightly mentioned, it is a conflict of interest between two Russian strongmen. Of course, we know Putin's background has been with the Soviet intelligence agencies, but many of them have no idea about Prigozhin, because Prigozhin, to the Western world, has always been this head of the, this group, Wagner Group, for black ops that they carry out, and also some of working beyond the Russian law as such. But who is Prigozhin? Prigozhin was in fact born in Leningrad, which is now today's St. Petersburg, and was in a Soviet prison for almost 9 years, and the charges that were against him then was for robbery and fraud. Now, he was released from prison when the Soviet Union fell, and he was taking up small businesses. He was having hot dog carts, and he was selling them, and then he got into bigger projects such as luxurious restaurants in St. Petersburg, and also came in touch with Russian elites. From there onwards, he started building his business and contacts, and from there he came in touch with the then deputy mayor of St. Petersburg, Vladimir Putin, and from then onwards, the relationship between both of them have been quite intimate, and also both of them have had been helping each other around. Putin is said to have used the state system to give him contracts, and he had enriched himself with these contracts. They consisted of big ticket contracts for supplying food, as well as doing catering for some of the state events, especially the visit of President George W. Bush, as well as other state leaders. And he had enriched himself and also come in touch with the powerful circles within Putin, and had also entrenched himself in Putin's circle as well. So Prigozhin, after that, is supposed to have also helped Putin when it came to the internet campaigning part of it, and therefore is said to have had a factory of trolls. And he's supposed to have also allegedly, according to the FBI, involved himself with the 2016 US presidential elections, on which there have been several questions of whether there was a Russian involvement or not. So this person has been part of Putin's inner circle. So how did Yevgeny Prigozhin today, after being part of Bakhmut's operation, in fact, it was supposed to be a very bloody affair in Bakhmut, because it was a city that was facing stiff resistance from the Ukrainians, and the Russian official army couldn't make any kind of an inroad into Bakhmut. And it was Prigozhin's mercenaries who were able to finally break the back of that resistance and take over Bakhmut. So right now, what led to this kind of animosity between Putin and the mercenary group? That is the big question we have to find, because here is a person who had been a staunch ally of the Russian president suddenly turning the guns against his master. And the reasons, of course, they are giving is that they are not telling you the truth of what is happening. They are not telling you about the deaths of Russian soldiers. They are not telling you why we went on an invasion of Ukraine. So something is triggering Prigozhin to go ahead against the Russian top brass, and probably also test the possibility of him replacing Putin. So I think right now what we are seeing is a conflict of Russian strongmen. Prigozhin probably taking the right opportunity now of a weakened Putin to attack him.
Absolutely right. Two strongmen facing off in Russia at a time when Putin is obviously weak and in a vulnerable position. As you said, fighting a very unpopular war, which doesn't seem to have much support among his own people. And then this war has been a long drawn out one. It's gone on for well over a year now, with the West pumping in money and military assistance into Ukraine to take on Russia in a big way. And of course, Putin is faced with a situation where his own armed forces have been demoralized in this war that has gone on for over a year now. So it's a significantly diminished Putin today that we're talking about, who now faces a massive threat from a man who till just recently was his strong supporter and staunch ally, somebody who has been in his inner circle for a very long time. Let's once again listen in to what Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, said in his address to the nation.
За наш суверенитет и независимость, за право быть и
For our
оставаться
sovereignty and
Россией,
independence,
государством
for the right to be and remain Russia, a state with a 1,000-year history. This is a battle when the fate of a people is being decided, and it requires the unity of all forces, unity, consolidation, and responsibility, when everything that weakens us must be thrown aside. Any discord that our external enemies can use and are using to undermine us from within. The actions that split our unity are in fact apostasy from our people, from our comrades in arms who are now fighting at the front. This is a stab in the back to our country and our people. We will protect our people and our statehood from any threats, including internal betrayal, and what we are facing is betrayal. Exorbitant ambitions and personal interests led to treason, to betrayal of both our country and people, and the task for which, side by side with our other units and subunits, the fighters and commanders of the Wagner Group fought and died. The heroes who liberated Soledar and Artyomsk, cities and towns of Donbass, fought and gave their lives for Russia and the unity of the Russian world. Their name and glory were also betrayed by those who are trying to organize a rebellion, pushing the country towards anarchy and fratricide.
All right, so we've heard what President Putin has said. We've also heard what his Betanwa, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has said after launching this insurrection against the Putin administration. Let's now play out for you a documentary by News9 Plus, which will tell you more about the Wagner Group in Russia. Take a look.
They are the first private army who defeated an army of a nation.
No army, professional army, would like someone else to fight their war.
If they do something which is illegal as far as what you call a war crime, then you will not be able to charge them.
In 2014, the Wagner Group gained prominence for fighting alongside Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine. It was founded by a Ukrainian-born Russian army officer, Dmitry Utkin, and he was working with military intelligence GRU. Utkin is reportedly a Nazi sympathizer and named his group after Richard Wagner. He's a German composer whose works were appropriated by Hitler. So, out here, the Wagner Group seems to be a brainchild of an intelligence agency created to fulfill the objective of its political master without being under the legal framework of a regular army. And of course, the master is obviously Vladimir Putin.
It is Prigozhin, who is a businessman very close to Putin. He has actually taken over this group, and now he constituted the Wagner Group, and now he is heading the Wagner Group. And officially, this group has been recognized by Russia as listed as a private company in 2022. President Putin is not directly dealing with Wagner army, though it is supposed to be affiliated under the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Armed Forces. Some of them are special forces officers from the Spetsnaz group, but majority of them are the people who are the criminals.
TV9 को विशेष तौर पर इजाजत मिली है, उन्हें आमंत्रित किया गया है कि हम वैगनर ग्रुप के हेडक्वार्टर को दिखाएं। आज TV9 के कैमरे पर आप वो देख रहे हैं जो कभी नहीं देखा होगा।
It was like a surprise for me when I saw that their headquarters. It was a 24-floor building, a very high quality building. I have even not seen such kind of building in New York or Paris. I just joked with the guy who was coordinating with me for the Wagner headquarters that am I in Langley or am I in some KGB headquarters? And he was saying, no, you are in a corporate office.
Such forces not always work in uniform. Such forces are so trained and recruited in a manner in which they can do multifarious tasks. There would be some people in this force who would work in civilian dress and make friends and gather intelligence. There will be some who will be hardcore, who may even get tasks of assassination somebody. They are reasonably well organized in the same pattern and lines as the regular army.
It's based on the experience of the person, his physical condition, his age, and his intellect level. So it's very specific.
They were saying that we are actually trying to build a new kind of force, and if you see after Bakhmut, finally they proved that they are the first private army who defeated an army of a nation.
The capture of Bakhmut city by Wagner is possibly the first time a mercenary group has fulfilled such a vital military objective and set a new standard in conventional warfare. The city has been flattened completely, and then the Wagner Group handed over the city to the Russian regulars, who then gave up all the advantages, suffered reverses as Ukrainian forces captured some nearby villages. And this led to a public outburst by the Wagner chief. And this clearly indicates that the Russian regulars and the militia are not on the same page, suggesting that a two-pronged war effort such as this has its drawbacks.
No army, professional army, would like someone else to fight their war, because the army will always be uncomfortable with a private army, and a regular army would not like anyone else to take credit for capture of a Bakhmut, which has been just going on since last 10 months.
It was a big pressure on Russian army that they have to also perform. So what I realized that after a certain period of time, if any country is going on war, they would like to hire any private military company like Wagner or anyone else.
So it's a multi-dimensional, multicultural, multitasking force, not under the purview of the law. As far as the world is concerned, if they do something which is illegal, as far as what you call a war crime, then you will not be able to charge them under a war crime, because Russian government says no, they're not under a regular military law.
Some countries have flirted with the idea of private contractors to wage a war. Of course, most notably is the US, which they did in Afghanistan and Iraq. The Wagner Group's success in the battlefields of Ukraine is now being seen as a dangerous template, but opposed by many, including those in India.
Private army is of no relevance. If we even think about it, it is something like Pakistan. They created, the ISI created so many terrorist groups. Where are those terrorists today? They are impacting them finally. So they had a problem the Russian army had a problem of motivation, of morale, of recruits not coming forth, and therefore India, there is no dearth of recruitment.
There are countries and regions where Wagner people have been used, say for example in Syria, in Lebanon, in South Africa, but they will only go and fight in these areas in support of the Russian interest.
The concept of private armies is more prevalent in authoritarian regimes, but it can also be seen as private contractors in countries with democratic setups, but at a smaller scale when we compare it to the Wagner Group. So the fallout of using such private armies can be messy. But from a very brute military point of view, private militia can help in situations where regular armies cannot.
Hello and welcome. You're watching News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and in the studio with me is my colleague Verghese as we continue to closely track the dramatic developments that are unfolding in Russia. There seems to be an attempt at a coup. Some are calling it an insurrection, yet others calling it an armed rebellion. The private militia called Wagner, headed by Yevgeny Prigozhin, seems to have turned on the Russian administration and President Vladimir Putin. In fact, Prigozhin has issued a series of threats saying that his forces are marching towards Moscow and they are going to take control of the Russian capital unless the top generals in the Russian military talk to him. They claim they've already taken control of the Russian city of Rostov. So just what's going on here? Is this an attempted coup? Russian President Vladimir Putin recognizing the dangers involved in the situation, recognizing the gravity of the situation, addressed the nation some time back. In strong words, he said, this is high treason, it is betrayal. These actions by the Wagner Group amount to stabbing the Russian people in the back, and these actions will not go unpunished. All right, at this point, we are joined by Ambassador Deepak Vora, former diplomat, Nandan Unikrishnan, author and distinguished fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. We're also joined by Major General Ashwini Sivaj, defense expert. We will go across to all of them in just a moment. But before that, let's once again listen in to what Vladimir Putin told the Russian people in that address to the nation a short while ago.
За наш суверенитет и независимость.
For our sovereignty and independence, for the right to be and remain Russia, a state with a 1,000-year history. This is a battle when the fate of a people is being decided, and it requires the unity of all forces, unity, consolidation, and responsibility, when everything that weakens us must be thrown aside. Any discord that our external enemies can use and are using to undermine us from within. The actions that split our unity are in fact apostasy from our people, from our comrades in arms who are now fighting at the front. This is a stab in the back to our country and our people. We will protect our people and our statehood from any threats, including internal betrayal, and what we are facing is betrayal. Exorbitant ambitions and personal interests led to treason, to betrayal of both our country and people, and the task for which, side by side with our other units and subunits, the fighters and commanders of the Wagner Group fought and died. The heroes who liberated Soledar and Artyomsk, cities and towns of Donbass, fought and gave their lives for Russia and the unity of the Russian world. Their name and glory were also betrayed by those who are trying to organize a rebellion, pushing the country towards anarchy and fratricide.
All right. Really dramatic developments unfolding in Russia as we speak. Is this an attempted coup? Some are calling it an insurrection, yet others are calling it an armed rebellion. Putin has issued a threat saying there will be dire consequences. People behind this will not go unpunished. He's called it high treason, betrayal, and putting a knife in the back of the Russian people is what this is, says Russian President Vladimir Putin. He's also said the very future of Russia is at stake. Let me go across to our guests now. Nandan Unikrishnan, if I could start with you, just what is going on in Russia? These developments are baffling, they're astounding, and they're worrying. The Wagner mercenary group, its chief, Yevgeny Prigozhin, claims that his troops have taken control of the Russian city of Rostov and that they're now marching towards Moscow. He has issued a threat saying under the top military leadership of Russia to hold talks with him. It's only a matter of time before his forces capture the Russian capital. Would you call it an attempted coup? Just what's going on here and what has brought this on in your assessment?
Thank you, Neha. Thank you for inviting me. Firstly, I think we need to get some facts in place. The Wagner Group on the ground at this point of time in Rostov is probably 25,000 people. The Russian army is close to 1 million. So I think the numbers speak for themselves. So there is no question of Wagner marching to Moscow, which is several hundred kilometers away from Rostov. Rostov's importance is the fact that it is the Southern Command headquarters, and it is the headquarters from which essentially the war in Ukraine is being managed. So in that sense, yes, it's an important city. And yes, Prigozhin has control of the headquarters. But please note, if you've been watching his own statements, he has clearly said that he is not interfering with any of the military operations, that the operations in Ukraine as commanded out of this headquarters are carrying on, and not a single officer has been prevented from performing his duties. This situation is the result of a long-standing difference of opinion that Mr. Prigozhin has had with the Russian defense minister and the chief of general staff, Mr. Gerasimov, as well as the defense minister, Shoigu. In fact, one of his demands is that the Russian state hand over these two individuals to him. So, to cap it all, I would say in a nutshell, yes, you could describe this as a mutiny. I think Prigozhin has seriously underestimated the strength of the Russian state. The Russian state will hit back. At this point of time, they're trying to do so without much what we tend to call collateral damage. But if this continues for much longer, they will just wipe him out.
Okay, that's very interesting, because there are some who are wondering if this is the biggest threat that Putin has faced in a very long time. But thank you for putting those important facts into perspective for us. You're saying, that this man, Prigozhin, has all of 25,000 forces, and he claims all 25,000 of us are ready to die. They're up against 1 million troops belonging to the Russian military, and if this goes on for much longer, then it'll not be long before the Russian forces decide to absolutely crush the man. But let me just ask you this question, Mr. Unikrishnan, before I move on to the other guests. While in terms of numbers, you're right, the Wagner Group really is not in a position to take on the Russian military, but there are a lot of videos that are doing the rounds on the social media and a lot of claims that in the city of Rostov, that Prigozhin claims to have taken control of, there was little or no resistance put up by the Russian army. Do you believe that there is an element of truth in these claims?
I completely agree that there was no resistance, because as you can see, taking over any military headquarters without casualties would imply that there was no resistance. The Wagner Group, you must remember, till now had access all over Russia in all military institutions, because they were part of the force that is fighting in Ukraine. They have recently been withdrawn from Bakhmut area, but they were supposed to go back there on the 4th of August. So I don't see a reason why the Russian military headquarters would prevent some of the members of of Wagner going into Russian military headquarters. Is there somebody who is complicit, who has assisted them in taking over? Possibly, I don't know. That will be established later, presumably after an inquiry is held. But at this point of time, it will be mere speculation. So I don't want to go down that road. Are there people in Russia who sympathize with Wagner? Yes, I'm sure there are. There are all the Russian right-wing nationalists who want Putin to be far more decisive. There are some crazies who are even suggesting that Putin should just nuke Ukraine. So you have all kinds of elements in Russia, like in any society, in any country, anywhere in the world. Is this the most significant challenge to Putin's power in the last 23 years? I don't think so. I think the most significant challenges none of us would even be aware of. They would have taken place somewhere inside some rooms in Kremlin, and we will never get to know, maybe 50, 60 years from now. But this is definitely not the most significant challenge.
Okay, interesting. Yes, complete your thoughts, sir.
I thought somebody was interrupting me. So, no, my final thought is that this is, from Putin's perspective, this is a needless distraction. He is focused on the war that he's fighting in Ukraine. And of course, he would be most upset by this kind of development. But at the same time, this is going to drive a dent into Putin's image, not just the image of Putin, but of the Russian state, that they have allowed this. But if you look at your own videos, the situation on the ground appears to be absolutely normal. People are going around using their mobiles to film all that is going on. So clearly, Mr. Prigozhin is hoping that he will be able to bargain for some kind of deal.
All right, interesting. This is not a coup, so we can all, in a sense, breathe easy. Though, you can imagine this is a development that has caused quite a flutter globally. Everybody keeping a very close eye on these developments. If I could just go across to Major General Ashwani Sivaj at this point. Major General Sivaj, do you agree with Nandan Unikrishnan's assessment? He says that this is at best a distraction for Putin and will dent his global image. But the Wagner Group and its chief, Yevgeny Prigozhin, are in no position to mount any serious and credible challenge to Putin. At this stage, if this goes on much longer, Putin and his military will crush Prigozhin. For the benefit of our viewers, if you could explain, sir, why do you believe Prigozhin is doing what he is. Mr. Unikrishnan talked about how there have been serious differences between Putin and Prigozhin for a long time now on how the Ukraine war is being fought. If you could just explain that to our viewers.
Yeah, Neha, 2-3 issue. You see, the point is, as far as the Wagner Group is concerned, it's a private army. It has got many criminals also who have been converted into army by basically Wagner Group. They have fought in Syria. They have also fought in Crimea. And as far as Russia is concerned, in this Russia-Ukraine war, the Battle of Bakhmut has been fought purely by Wagner Group, and they managed to succeed after about 9 to 10 months. Now, as far as present situation is concerned, they have taken over the Rostov, which is a western portion of Ukraine, and the southern headquarters. Now, as far as the strength is concerned, it is about 25,000 to 30,000. So, why it has happened? There was a difference of opinion which was brewing up between Wagner Group chief as well as the defense minister, especially in the functioning of it, because they wanted a freedom of action, Wagner Group, and they feel that they should get more ammunition and they should have more say, which possibly was denied by the defense minister. No, but how the situation has come to this pass, the question comes is it the doing of Wagner Group, the difference of opinion? No, to me it looks like that this is a handiwork of the intelligence agency of the Western countries. They were involved in that. They wanted this sort of rift to come between Wagner Group as well as the Russian army, and they to some extent has succeeded in it. Now, the second question comes in, is they capable of denting the image of Russia? You see, Russia-Ukraine war is on. The counter-offensive of Ukraine is going on, though slow, but it is progressing. If the sort of attention of Russian army is diverted in handling Wagner Group, obviously it will have some impact on the morale as well as the fighting capability of the Russian army. Now, as far as Wagner Group is concerned, if they think that they can go from Rostov and toward the Moscow, which is about 700 kilometers, they will make a biggest mistake. But if they hold on to Rostov and they fight, they can create a lot of nuisance value to Russian army, because after all, they are the one which have won number of battles for Russian army. They are good fighters, and defensive battle can be easily fought for a longer duration than a person who is attacking. To me, it looks like that this will be a bloody battle in case it is fought on urban concept. But my point is the Russian army is now thinking to create a rift between Wagner Group, and so that from within the Wagner Group, somehow they can dislodge their leader. Because if they fight to the United Wagner Group, then it will be a bloody war. It won't end in another 5-7 days. It will take a lot of time till the ammunition is there with Wagner Group. So I suppose from all sides the things are working. As far as Putin is concerned, he wants the Wagner Group chief should be targeted and he should be killed at the earliest. At the same time, if the things are not happening, is some sort of under the table, some sort of treaty, some sort of thing to buy time and thereafter finish him later. That can be also a strategy. As far as the Western countries are concerned, there seem to be agencies which are involved, which are the one which were working on this to create a rift between Wagner Group and Russian army, so that the Russian army become weak. After all, if the Russian army was so strong, so where was the requirement to have a private army? Everyone knows Wagner Group is a bunch of criminals and they do not follow any rules of regulation of a professional army. So all said and done, this has dented the image of Russian army and Putin. But to me, it looks like that in the end, Putin will be able to overcome. Wagner Group will be a cause of a deterrence, but not create too much of a problem for Putin.
Okay.
In another 4 days, I think he will be able to overcome. Putin's aim is to create a rift between the Wagner Group so that the majority of the generals of Wagner Group are not with their chief and they raise their hand. So
and will Putin succeed in that mission? He very well might. given that this is really a battle of unequals, as has been pointed out by Nandan Unikrishnan. We also have Major General S.P. Sinha with us. Before I go across to Major General S.P. Sinha and Ambassador Deepak Vora, I want to ask another question of Nandan Unikrishnan, who has to leave the show in the next 5 to 7 minutes. Mr. Unikrishnan, you said that, Prigozhin is in no position to oust President Putin. That it's not as if a coup is on the cards. This is a distraction for Putin and it will dent his image. However, the question that I want to ask you is, yes, there were differences between the defense minister and Prigozhin for a long time over how Russia has waged this war against Ukraine. But what do you think was the immediate trigger for this mutiny by Prigozhin? What do you think he is hoping to accomplish? Because it's not as if he does not realize what he is up against or who he is up against and the strength of his opponent. And how do you think the West would be viewing these developments?
Yeah, I think Prigozhin, in a sense, unless events prove me wrong later, I think Prigozhin, in a sense, has miscalculated. He was hoping, presumably, for expressions of support, not just expressions of support, but action, supportive action from sections of the Russian army. He was thinking that there are some Russian generals who would actually side with him. Unfortunately, what has happened, unfortunately for him, what has happened is the generals who most often were cited as people who were close to Prigozhin and were supportive of him actually have come out with video messages appealing to the Wagner personnel to stop what they're doing and to go back into their barracks. So I think at one level, there was some serious miscalculation. But having embarked on the path that he has chosen, Prigozhin has very little choice, but at least for now, to continue to pursue the line of action. As the general mentioned earlier, it's a fact of, it is a fact that he's holding the Russian HQ. He's controlling the city of Rostov. He definitely controls the airport and some important communication places. So if he's able to hold out there, he is going to be difficult to dislodge in a few days. So I presume he's going to try and leverage that into some kind of a deal with the Russian state. Whether he's successful or not, as I said, that's the realm of speculation. We'll have to just wait and see. As far as the Western countries are concerned, those who are supportive of Ukraine in this war against Russia will probably be quietly rejoicing because anything that distracts the Russian state from executing its war and countering the current counteroffensive of the Ukrainians would be welcome. So from that perspective, I think the Western nations would be quietly rejoicing. And over and above that, it also provides 2 or 3 other additional benefits. One is a serious dent in the image of the Russian state, a serious dent in the ability of the Russian state to control units under its command. And all of this are serious challenges that the Russian state has to deal with. I would say these are just about as serious as the challenges the Russian state had to face when they started this war. They suddenly realized at that point that their economy, their army wasn't prepared to execute that particular war. And they sort of adapted on the go and have come to this stage today. Now, this is another challenge they'll have to face. And it is going to be a serious distraction.
Well, before we let you go, Mr. Unikrishnan, one question that I have is that Putin has always had this image of being in complete control of whatever he has been executing, whether it's a project in the state when it comes to the economy or whether it is about the war efforts, everything. But here there is a chance of him looking slightly weakened, because his response also has been to immediately jump on the fact that Russia's future is at stake. For a 25,000 mercenary army, even if we are trying to discount it, why would he in fact jump in and say that the future of Russia is at stake? It is a big statement to make. If it was only a bunch of mercenaries who were walking towards him and taking part or certain control of certain parts of his country, that is loaded, which is in fact say that maybe Putin is finding the threat from Prigozhin quite serious.
Varghese, I'm afraid I have to disagree with you. I think what he is doing is he's preparing the Russian public for what could be a bloodbath. Because if Prigozhin does not surrender, and if Prigozhin decides to make a fight with it, with whatever troops are with him, then, as the general pointed out before me, a war in an urban situation, the attackers are going to suffer much more. And Prigozhin and his troops are battle hardened. They've just come out of Bakhmut, where they fought precisely this kind of an urban war, and therefore they are prepared. So from that perspective, I think Putin was pushing the ante up, trying to also prepare public opinion for this. The second is Putin is also seriously aware that this is going to be a dent on his popularity, and therefore he needs to shore it up. He needs to show that he is in control and that he is never going to let down Russia and any challenge to the Russian state. So that's why he has decided in the first place to make an address to the Russian people. This is quite unlike him. There have been events, does not mean that the president of Russia suddenly appears on television immediately. The events that started in Rostov started, let's say, after midnight, so around 3 o'clock India time in the morning. And he was already on television by less than 12 hours later. So I think he understands that this is a serious challenge to his image and to the ability of the Russian state in future to command the loyalty of its troops as well as of its people. So he is responding to that. But in actual technical terms, as I was saying earlier, I think this is a challenge that the Russian state can deal with. But the psychological impact of this and the what I would call the PR impact of this could be much, much larger.
That's interesting. The PR impact could be much larger. You also made the interesting point that the West might be secretly rejoicing. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, has said this is just the beginning, insinuating that he believes this is the beginning of the end for Putin. But it looks like he's not going to be that lucky just yet, according to Nandan Unikrishnan. On that note, Mr. Unikrishnan, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your perspective with us on this developing story. Let me now go across to Ambassador Deepak Vora. Ambassador Vora, thank you for waiting patiently. How do you view these dramatic developments that are taking place in Russia? You have this mercenary group that is issuing threats to the Russian president, almost suggesting that a coup of sorts is underway. The Russian president goes on national television, addresses the Russian people, says the future of Russia is at stake. What is going on here?
Thank you very much, ma'am. Always a pleasure to learn from you. It's absolutely amazing. Your knowledge and that of Professor Unikrishnan, I agree with him 110%. He seems to know this country. I thought I knew it well, having lived there, but he is right on what he's talked about. The general has given you the military perspective. Let me put a couple of things across very clearly. This character called Yevgeny Prigozhin, he's a hard-drinking, right-wing, ultra-nationalist Russian. I've met him, by the way, in Moscow. He hasn't attacked President Putin. What he says is that get rid of that Sergei Shoigu, he's an absolute scoundrel, he's not telling you the truth, etc., etc. Russians are very, very sensitive to threats to their existence. Ma'am, I would urge you, I'm sure you've done it. Do you remember a classic by Mikhail Sokolov called And Quiet Flows the Dawn? Epic picture of Russian life during a time of crisis. Russia quit the First World War, but they didn't get support. Exactly what some of their soldiers or the Wagner Group fellows are saying about Ukraine. You're not giving us supplies, you're not giving us food, you're not giving us logistics, etc. All that was happening and Russians were being slaughtered by Germany. We quit, then came the Russian Revolution, then came the emergence of the Soviet Union collapsed. That was yet another challenge. Now, ma'am, what has Putin said? I just wanted to give you this background about the Germans giving weapons to Ukraine. He told the Russian people for the second time in less than a century, Germany is attacking Mother Russia. It is very, very significant. So they rally around it. As far as this character is concerned, he's disappointed. I can sense frustration. He was known also as Putin's chef because he owns a series of restaurants, including, by the way, an Indian restaurant, not in Moscow, but slightly outside Moscow. And apparently the Russian president enjoys Indian food from time to time. So what he's trying to do, I believe, or what he's expressing is a sense of frustration. He's been fighting all across Africa. And most of it is on a self-financing basis. In Syria, he said, give me this oil field. And since I serve in Africa, I know he went around saying, give me these gold mines, give me this, give me that, give me everything else, and I'll fight for you. And many of the governments, because they have weak militaries, happily welcomed him. So here he is disappointed. He's lost probably half his fighters. And by the way, might interest you to know that some of our retired soldiers from Asia, I'm not saying India, also served with the Wagner Group. I'm aware of this. What does he want? He wants to make a much more serious effort than what he thinks is being done now for Ukraine. And taking Rostov-on-Don, which has the military headquarters, you know, ma'am, this effectively means that he is in charge now of the Ukraine operations. But of course, he's now, we are told that his fellows are marching on Moscow, which is very stupid. They're going to be eliminated without any difficulty. So Putin reaching out to the Russian people is telling them, we have an external threat to our unity, which is the neo-Nazis sitting in Kiev, and now we have an internal threat. And so he's talking of a counter-terrorism operation, just as Ukraine was a special military operation. Take it from me, ma'am. I know the Russian people well. They will rally to Putin's cause. Mr. Prigozhin's mutiny, not a coup, his limited insurrection, is doomed even before it starts.
Well, Ambassador Vora, I'm quite interested in the way that you have, in fact, spoken about this coup as such. But for me, the biggest question was, and I was asking even Krishnan, was that why is it that you get a high-spirited rhetoric against this? Because if it was something that has to be, I mean, if this person does not command the kind of power that he commands, then why so much of attention being given to him?
Because President Vladimir Putin is under pressure. You know this better than I do. What was supposed to end in a week or 10 days or 2 weeks has been going on for a year and a half now. Obviously, he's under pressure. Look at his body language. Look at the comments that he's been making. There was one time when that character, the fellow who used to work in a circus in Ukraine, said, okay, I'm going to talk to the Russian. Then he issues a decree saying there'll be no talks while Putin is in charge. Putin knows, considers it, described it as an existential threat, not just for Mother Russia, but also for himself. They've also gone and indicted him, the International War Crimes Tribunal. So he knows that if he goes out of power, he goes off to The Hague, and then what happens to him? You know it better than I do what happened to those Africans and to the Serbian fellow who were taken there. Therefore, he's putting it across as a severe threat to the unity of the Russian Federation, Mother Russia, and he's asking the Russian people to support him. And plus, they have appealed to those who are fighting for the Wagner Group that don't do these funny things. Please abandon these chaps and go talk to the nearest Russian military units. We will do whatever we have to. You're not going to be punished as severely as you would otherwise. So I do think, sir, that this is, at the moment, based on my conversations, I speak the language with several of my friends there, this appears to be a totally unnecessary storm in a teacup, and Mr. Putin is reacting or responding in a way that shows that he is in charge. He's the macho guy, he's the tough guy, and he's going to punish these fellows who are trouble.
Okay, interesting. Storm in a teacup, says Ambassador Deepak Vora. Major General S.P. Sinha, let me come to you now. How do you view these developments? Prigozhin knows that his adversary is 100 times more powerful than he is. What is he hoping to achieve here?
Firstly, I think it is a great conspiracy by the West and Western intelligence agencies against Mr. Putin. Secondly, there is a frustration on the part of Wagner Group chief that for last 5-6 months he has been adequate depth, and then his troops are not being looked after. So that is his frustration. But this frustration may be a camouflage. It just must be maybe a cover-up story. The actual thing is that maybe that the Western people have bought over this man. But about the danger we cause to Russia, there are two angles, two dimensions. Firstly, the dimension with regard to Wagner Group chief opening another front for Russia. And that front is within the house of Russia. So that additional front is going to cause concern in a battle war scenario. So therefore, Russia will have to concentrate now within Russia and outside Russia. Within Russia on Wagner Group chief's activities and outside Russia towards Ukraine. So that is a serious matter. Before Russia was fighting on only one front. So when two fronts open, the problems arise. Thirdly, what is the strength of Wagner Group? 25,000. Are 25,000 still intact? Few of them must have been killed and dead in the battle. So therefore, let's even imagine that the strength is 25,000. The active service personnel of Russian army is 8.30 lakhs. So just imagine that it is 32 times more strength the Russian army has got. So when we were young, we were taught the ratio of attacker to defender has to be 3:1. So if Russian army has strength of 8.30, the Wagner Group strength should be 24 lakhs something. Is it so? They are in 25,000, and actually the figure must be less. So there is no comparison. Both cannot fight. It is an uneven battle. But why so? Why it is being done? It is a regime change. It is a regime change by the West. They want Putin out because they are now also getting tired. There's a battle fatigue factor. They are also getting tired of the battle. They want the battle to close. And as long as Mr. Putin is alive, this will not happen. So either kill Putin or go for regime change. So this is the conspiracy. The M factor, the money factor, Wagner chief has been bought over. But the question is, are all his generals and the commanders are with him, or they can switch sides? So that is another dimension. Thirdly, why Mr. Putin is addressing the nation? Within a matter of hours, he has come on the broadcast and addressing the nation. Mr. Putin is trying to mobilize the nation. And any nation, when the people realize that there's a threat to their existence, they don't worry about the do's and don'ts and mistakes of the leader. They just get behind that leader and support the leader. And that is what is going to happen in Russia. They are going to support Putin, irrespective of merits of the case. The fact is that Mr. Putin will come hard on the Wagner Group. But in the interim, there will be adversaries in the Ukraine war. And on that, the offensive against Ukrainians will slightly take a back seat or will go slow. So that is a serious matter. And Mr. Putin is going to react and come back very fast, win the lost ground, and teach a lesson to Wagner chief. So that is the scenario. But presently, it is a serious matter, and Mr. Putin will have to apply his brain and mind, mobilize nation, mobilize troops. But the point was raised as to why, when Russian troop strength is 8.30 lakhs, why Wagner Group was employed, why a mercenary group was employed. These mercenary groups, they fight for money. They have no love lost for the nation. They are money-minded people. They are mercenaries. So anybody who gives money, they're likely to switch sides. Okay. So why the Wagner Group? To that question, that is because Mr. Putin named this operation as a special operation and did not specify. He wanted to get behind the cover that it is not the Russian army which is attacking. It is a special group, and Wagner Group is attacking. So all that positioning Mr. Putin was trying to do. But at present, the scenario is cause of concern for Mr. Putin. But I think eventually he will be winner, and Mr. Wagner Group chief will be in trouble. Either he will lose his life or he will lose the game, which has been initiated, planned, conspired by Western powers and Western intelligence.
So then the question is really, what is Prigozhin's game plan here? You're saying this is a Western conspiracy. Why would they actually get somebody like a Prigozhin to try and oust Putin from power if he is obviously no match for Putin and his military? Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, former Director General of Infantry, also joining us at this point. General Kulkarni, we're talking about 25,000 troops belonging to the Wagner Group on the one hand and close to 1 million troops on the Russian side. This is obviously a battle of unequals. We don't know if the West is behind this. A lot of conspiracy theories doing the rounds right now. But the question really is, what is Prigozhin's game plan here? He knows that his troops are going to be outnumbered. He knows that Putin can crush him anytime he wants to. Yes, this is a nuisance for Putin. Yes, everybody admits that this is going to dent Putin's image, but it is not really a serious challenge to Putin in that sense. So what do you think is going on here?
Thank you, Neha. At the very outset, I must say that Putin's chef has done what probably Zelensky, supported by 30 countries, couldn't do. A real counteroffensive. Something, whatever.
Or rattled Putin at the very least.
Putin's, probably Prigozhin, being his dearest friend, knew the way to the heart is through his stomach. And that is what he has done. He stabbed in his back, an armed rebellion. Something, when I heard it for the first time, I couldn't believe it myself, that such a thing could happen in Russia. And especially when Putin himself, a KGB man who knows how to handle, if such a thing was brewing, he should have handled it really very well. It may be a small strength. It may be a strength of only 25, 40,000. But moving such a large strength from the front and taking them back and creating such kind of a, almost mutinous feeling in Russia, inside Russia, maybe about 1,000 kilometers from Moscow, whatever be. Prigozhin may be a mercenary, he may be a criminal, he may be whatever it may be. What the West failed till now, probably this man has created that division. And this division at this point of time is dangerous. He may not succeed. That's perfectly fine. He will be shot dead. It's perfectly fine. Those 25,000 criminals or mercenaries will be arrested. No problems whatsoever. But he's done what the West has failed till now. He has broken into Russia. It's within Russia that you find, of course, he cannot win. There is no denying the fact. But from Putin's body language right now, what I don't know whether the what is being shown is quite recent. He looks nervous. He finds that, yes, the West seems to have planted it and planted it so well that at a time when Zelensky is talking about counteroffensive on the frontier, here's a man who's done it right deep inside. He has mobilized everybody in Russia. He's mobilized everybody. He's almost appealing to the countrymen that stay united. This is not the time. Obviously, there's an existential threat to Russia. He himself is a friend of his who was till now. They fought very well at Bakhmut. He is getting after the defense minister to say that he hadn't been given adequate ammunition, he hadn't been given the adequate logistic support, and now walks into Rostov, gets into the logistical headquarters, the military headquarters of Russia, and threatens everybody. I think it's a real serious threat, which Russia would, of course, be able to take on. That's not a real problem. But again and again, as I say, where Zelensky with 30 countries supporting him couldn't do, here's a man who was a friend of Putin, has done it, stabbed in his back, an armed rebellion. Russia is now on the real tenterhook. They wouldn't know what's happening. They'll control it. But 35,000 troops mean a lot. And a lot of people from Russian army, also because he's a gangster, he's a criminal. He's going to get a lot of people from there also. As yet one doesn't know if one or Russian general decides to break lines. It's not going to be easy. So Putin has got to really be very, very careful. This thing at a time when everybody thought Putin is strong, he suddenly now seems to be a man collapsing. I wouldn't say that would be a very strong word to say he was collapsing, but yes, otherwise you would have had him shot dead long back. He hasn't done that. The fact that he hasn't got him shot dead is a problem. And the fact that he was his very dear friend, and dear friend, supposedly, who gave him burgers to eat, and everybody says, Putin's chef. What's happened? You mean to say Putin doesn't know what's going on in his country? He should have known. And a man who's been protesting, saying this for the last about 2 months. So I thought, I personally think it's a real call which Putin has to take. Russia is got to be very careful. West must be celebrated.
Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, this also was my question, because, and also I'll put it across to Ambassador Vora as well. When we look at Russia, we are all used to strong leaders in Russia. We have always seen that there is a strongman who is always having that country under control, and then there is a transition that happens in certain ways. I think, are we being lulled in keeping that kind of approach on Russia? things might be not. I'm sticking out my neck. I agree with Ambassador Vora, who's has been knowing the language and knows the country much better than me. But if I am supposed to be in the 1% category that is going to say that Putin is weakened, am I sticking my neck too much, saying that there is a possibility that within the Russian military there is a fatigue that is set in to the point where people want Putin out? Am I am I reading too much into it? I can be corrected. Ambassador Vora, first to you, and then I shall go to Sanjay Kulkarni.
My question is, they want him out for what purpose? To make peace with Ukraine? Oh, no, sir. Russian self-respect, self-esteem is much too strong. When the Soviet Union collapsed, we know what happened. Their nose was ground into the dust. The triumphalism of the West, the Russians haven't forgotten. Remember, there used to be an alcoholic character called Boris Yeltsin, sold the country. Russians still remember that. They see Putin as a strong man capable of reviving the glory of the Soviet Union. He called its dissolution the greatest tragedy of the last century. No, not at all. What is really happening here is that this character feels, and this is my assessment, so he's, by the way, the majority of his soldiers, General Kulkarni, are Cossacks. They are supposed to be the Afghans of Russia. These are the chaps who used to live in the Don River Valley, etc. So he's now, he wants Putin's clearance, which Sergei Shoigu, who hasn't been giving defense minister, that look, now give me all your chaps, I'll lead them, I'll take them to Kyiv, and I'll cut up Zelensky and bring him to you for breakfast. That's the kind of fellow he is. That's what he's done in Africa. Go attack the regime, whichever African regime he supports. Go attack their enemies, boil them for breakfast, bring them back. Completely ruthless. And he takes his Cossacks along with him wherever he goes. That's what he probably wanted to do in Ukraine, which he was not given permission to do. So he's angry, and Putin is furious.
Okay, Putin is furious. Which way is this going to go? We will, of course, be tracking this story very closely. But for now, thanks to all our guests for joining us and sharing their valued perspective with us on this developing story. As we wrap up this discussion, we will leave you with this special News 9 Plus documentary that puts into perspective the Wagner Group and its operations.
They are the first private army who defeated an army of a nation.
No army, professional army, would like someone else to fight their war.
If they do something which is illegal as far as what you call a war crime, then you will not be able to charge them.
In 2014, the Wagner Group gained prominence for fighting alongside Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine. It was founded by a Ukrainian-born Russian army officer, Dmitry Utkin, and he was working with military intelligence GRU. Utkin is reportedly a Nazi sympathizer and named his group after Richard Wagner. He's a German composer whose works were appropriated by Hitler. So, out here, the Wagner Group seems to be a brainchild of an intelligence agency created to fulfill the objective of its political master without being under the legal framework of a regular army. And of course, the master is obviously Vladimir Putin.
It is Prigozhin, who is a businessman very, very close to Putin. He has actually taken over this group, and now he constituted the Wagner Group, and now he is heading the Wagner Group. And officially, this group has been recognized by Russia as listed as a private company in 2022. President Putin is not directly dealing with Wagner army, though it is supposed to be affiliated under the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Armed Forces. Some of them are special forces officers from the Spetsnaz group, but majority of them are the people who are the criminals.
टीवी9 को विशेष तौर पर इजाजत मिली है, उन्हें आमंत्रित किया गया है कि हम वैगनर ग्रुप के हेडक्वार्टर को दिखाएं। आज टीवी9 के कैमरे पर आप वो देख रहे हैं जो कभी नहीं देखा होगा।
It was like a surprise for me when I saw that their headquarters. It was a 24-floor building, a very high quality building. I have even not seen such kind of building in New York or Paris. I just joked with the guy who was coordinating with me for the Wagner headquarters that am I in Langley or am I in some KGB headquarters? And he was saying, no, you are in a corporate office.
Such forces not always work in uniform. Such forces are so trained and recruited in a manner in which they can do multifarious tasks. There would be some people in this force who would work in civilian dress and make friends and gather intelligence. There will be some who will be hardcore, who may even get tasks of assassination somebody. They are reasonably well organized in the same pattern and lines as the regular army.
It's based on the experience of the person, his physical condition, his age, and his intellect level. So it's very specific.
They were saying that we are actually trying to build a new kind of force, and if you see after Bakhmut, finally they proved that they are the first private army who defeated army of a nation.
The capture of Bakhmut city by Wagner is possibly the first time a mercenary group has fulfilled such a vital military objective and set a new standard in conventional warfare. The city has been flattened completely, and then the Wagner Group handed over the city to the Russian regulars, who then gave up all the advantages, suffered reverses as Ukrainian forces captured some nearby villages. And this led to a public outburst by the Wagner chief. And this clearly indicates that the Russian regulars and the militia are not on the same page, suggesting that a two-pronged war effort such as this has its drawbacks.
No army, professional army, would like someone else to fight their war, because the army will always be uncomfortable with a private army, and a regular army would not like anyone else to take credit for capture of a Bakhmut, which has been just going on since last 10 months.
It was a big pressure on Russian army that they have to also perform. So what I realized that after a certain period of time, if any country is going on war, they would like to hire any private military company like Wagner or anyone else.
So it's a multi-dimensional, multicultural, multitasking force, not under the purview of the law. As far as the world is concerned, if they do something which is illegal, as far as what you call a war crime, then you will not be able to charge them under a war crime, because Russian government says no, they are not under our regular military law.
Some countries have flirted with the idea of private contractors to wage a war. Of course, most notably is the US, which they did in Afghanistan and Iraq. The Wagner Group's success in the battlefields of Ukraine is now being seen as a dangerous template, but opposed by many, including those in India.
Private army is of no relevance. If we even think about it, it is something like Pakistan. They created, the ISI created so many terrorist groups. Where are those terrorists today? They are impacting them finally. So they had a problem the Russian army had a problem of motivation, of morale, of recruits not coming forth, and therefore India, there is no dearth of recruitment.
There are countries and regions where Wagner people have been used, say for example in Syria, in Lebanon, in South Africa, but they will only go and fight in these areas in support of the Russian interest.
The concept of private armies is more prevalent in authoritarian regimes, but it can also be seen as private contractors in countries with democratic setups, but at a smaller scale when we compare it to the Wagner Group. So the fallout of using such private armies can be messy. But from a very brute military point of view, private militia can help in situations where regular armies cannot.
BrahMos, stealthy, lethal, precise. It flies at 3 times the speed of sound and cuts through a warship like a hot knife through butter. China's navy has threatened its neighbors, and they are turning to the BrahMos for protection. The warship killer. This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
मैं इमरान अहमद खान नियाजी सबके दिल से हल्फ उठाता हूँ.
When Imran Khan came initially into politics, he thought his personal popularity would be sufficient for him. It didn't happen.
The retired military generals are openly saying that Imran Khan is a better choice.
इमरान खान